As undertaken earlier, as well as in the briefing by the Secretary General, we did say that we will avail our deployees in government led by the Economic Transformation Subcommittee Chairperson to just give you a quick update on the work we are doing to address the following issues: the general fiscal management in government, very well known to you, who is here in her capacity as the chairperson of the Economic Transformation Subcommittee of the National Executive Committee, as well as Comrade Josienzo Ramohupa, who is part of the same subcommittee, but is also the ANC's deployee dealing with matters of electricity. Over to you, Chair of the subcommittee.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mahlengi. Somlomo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As said, also acknowledging Comrade Sputla, who's here with me. From the subcommittee point of view, we continue to work around the economic recovery and growth. And there would be issues that we have previously agreed upon. And Comrade Sputla will go into detail. You would remember that from conference, we agreed that we have to sort out load shedding and load shedding. We are seeing green shoots, and we are confident of the recovery in this area. Comrade Sputla will go into detail. We remain with implementation of the ERRP as our basis in terms of foundation. Therefore, investment in infrastructure development as part of recovery broadly remains critical. The issues again from conference that we raised and that we continue to manage and report upon in the NEC, which also will be reported in this NEC. They are reported in this NEC. It's issues around logistics, rail and road, so movement of people and goods remains critical. So the recovery of the Brussels line remains critical. So Comrade Cindy as well briefing the NEC this weekend. Issues around dealing with Transnet, but also broadly around as we look at how do we get our economy back on track. You'd see that when we look at the statistics, already we are seeing the economy showing green shoots in terms of recovery towards what we saw in pre-COVID levels, but there is some work that needs to be done. And sometimes I say people assume that what we see with the recovery of the economy is out of osmosis. It's not automatic. It was not just ordinarily. It was deliberate work that was done in the implementation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And you remember that we had reported that the implementation of the ERRP actually was seen to the level of 80%. The work in terms of focusing around the reform continues, and also even on that area, there are green shoots. And that's why when we look at the report that is released by Operation Vulindlela in government regularly, does show some level of implementation of the work. In the ERRP as well, we spoke about the work that is done by SARS, and you would have seen quite commendable work that is done by SARS, recovery of the work and repositioning of SARS. I think we are saying from the NC point of view, we must support that work in terms of enforcement of compliance, but dealing with illicit outflows. On the fiscal management, you'd remember that Comrade Mahlengi had briefed you at some point where Alliance Secretariat had taken a decision that we will work together to find solutions in some of the challenges. That approach continues. Myself and Comrade Enoch, in his capacity as Minister of Finance, have been meeting with the Alliance team. I'm chairing that session. We will be reporting to the Alliance Secretariat, but quite commendable sessions have been held. Quite extensive discussions have been held, and we are finding each other. There are areas where we agree that they are non-negotiables, but there are also areas that we think that will be what we have to do in long term. One of the agreements is that the alliance will have to convene an economic summit, and the SG would have highlighted this previously and together with our spokesperson. But the ultimate goal, even in this area, is to recover the economy, because we do think that the discussion around the fiscal environment happens because we've seen pressures in terms of revenue generation. What the ANC is saying is that the importance of fiscal management remains. We've got to ensure that infrastructure development continues and it's not compromised, because it has been identified as an area of emphasis for growth and also for recovering of jobs. You would have seen also the green shoots around jobs. But another area that we have also agreed is that for government not to lose credibility, it has to continue to implement what it has reached as an agreement in terms of public service agreement, because we do believe that this is one of the critical areas that is important. But we are also saying the management of debt remains important, not to compromise the fiscal standing of the sovereignty of the country. And there are quite a number of innovative ways that we think that from government point of view, they will be able to intervene and therefore look at. There are also conversations that we've had, because what we have agreed is that when managing the fiscal is to be able to see and look at areas of non-performance or under expenditure. So there would be areas where previously there have been underperformance, and analysis by technical teams that we have asked them to do that work, look at whether in those areas we can claw back. Is there a possibility of being able to utilize the actually midterm reviews of either departments that are normally not able to spend and therefore save? And we always say that departments should not have money to put it in their accounts for generating income or interest, but for service on the ground. And we do believe that government contributes towards economic growth. So if you are to see GDP growth, government has to play its role in terms of investment in the sectors, but in terms of services. So every area interrogation is quite critical, and we've asked government to look into these areas, but not compromise critical areas. Securing the economy remains critical, and therefore some of the work that needs to be done and financing of the security of the economy, it's critical, and those are some of the pillars that we have agreed upon that should be protected and be able to deal with. The other area that we are paying attention, as our spokesperson has said, is the issue of cost of living. We continue to monitor. We are worried about this area because these are households. So debt servicing burden for household remains because of the interest rate, but also other factors, such as the fuel prices caused by the high cost in terms of our imports. And we do acknowledge that what drives cost of living is both internal and external factors. So those remain. Issues such as Russia and Ukraine conflict, as long as they are there, remains as a risk for us. But what are the cushioning measures that we've got to do as the country to be able to ensure that we do not have people living, finding themselves seriously in trouble and not being able to put food on their table. We've done some analysis in terms of this work. For example, one of the research work that we are going through is where you are able to see some of the townships being segregated. For example, when you look at some of the reports that are produced that says, in an example, Soweto, 40% of the families in Soweto are living on 1 meal per day. And those are the analysis that you do to be able to track what is happening. SABC released a tracking in terms of food inflation that went up to 9.9 in July. We're tracking that as well to see what interventions can be done. The recent one is the avian influenza in terms of the increase. For example, we saw the increase in cost in terms of eggs. And one of the issues that we are concerned again in the cost of living, it's how retailers as well react. When we look at the issue of eggs, for example, you'd find that retailers went and put the prices high. Obviously, they are saying they are managing demand, but we do think that there are quite a number of areas that we are seeing some of the trends of even when the prices are coming down, retailers not bringing down the cost. And part of what we are recommending is that government has to get involved in monitoring this area, for example, through our DTIC, but engaging the sector intensively to ensure that it does not continue to have high food prices unnecessary in terms of our households, and be able to pay attention into those. We're seeing you'd remember last time when we briefed the issue of interest rates. You'd have seen the results over time recently. We'll continue to monitor those in terms of just having the interest rates going down in terms of our work. But overall, I think, Somlomo, what we are saying as ETC is that we've got to deal with the causal factors of why the economy is not growing. Because all these other things that I'm talking about are effects or output or things that, what you can call symptoms of an economy that is not growing to the level that you want. There are symptoms when we do projections, we do our own modeling in terms of what we need to do, growing the economy in terms of sorting out the logistics side, sorting out energy security, but also paying attention in terms of the growth areas, especially in infrastructure development, would be in the coming 2 to 3 years, at least see some level of growth towards 3% or even above. And what we are paying attention is to say that even when we are to see that growth, what we want to see a growth that is creating jobs, dealing with poverty, but also unemployment. We don't want to see such past experiences where we had growth in terms of the economy, but it was a jobless growth. So those are the areas that we are paying attention to from an ETC point of view. Comrade Sputla will go into details on the energy things. I didn't go into those, and then we'll take questions from that side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chen. Good afternoon to everyone. As Comrade Mamoloko has correctly indicated that the current NEC does take a great deal of interest in trying to understand South Africa's economic growth story, and really the major reason why the NEC is exerting itself on a comprehensive analysis and articulation of that growth story, as the chair has indicated, is that the growth, economic growth, is going to underpin our efforts to realize thoroughgoing transformation, the achievement of universal access, and ensuring that there's an equitable distribution of the democratic dividend. In the course of doing that, the NEC has arrived at a determination that there are structural constraints to the South African economy, and those are indispensable to the resolution of the economic question in the country. So the first one is the issue of unserviced electricity demand, what you and I commonly refer to as load shedding. And that has got multiple manifestations. First is that it got an impact on the cost of living, as Comrade Mamoloko has indicated, because of the following, that if you look at your producers in the country, the farmers, they have to invest a significant amount of capital costs to support those activities that require production activities that require the availability of uninterrupted and quality supply of electricity. And as a result of load shedding or unmet demand, they make a significant capital investment, the procuring of diesel generators, but it also has got operational implications in that they have to purchase diesel on an ongoing basis. And what they typically do is that they are going to pass on that cost to the end consumer. And if you had to look at the percentage of disposable income that the poor are spending on a basic basket of food, is disproportionate compared to the middle and high income earners. So what that means is that load shedding has got a disproportionate impact on the poor. So they are feeling it much more than any other person. And then if you look at, listen to the sentiments of the governor of the Reserve Bank every time when he announces the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee, is that part of the reason why they are either upping the repo rate or maintaining them at the current high levels is principally as a result of load shedding, which is stunting the growth of the South African economy. When you go to the retail sectors, they'll tell you that there's a cost associated with maintaining cold chain, ensuring that you extend the shelf life of their products, so they have to buy generators, they have to buy diesel. And of course, that has got implications on the poor. I mean, one of the big retailers that I listed the other day when they released their results, they indicated that they are spending upwards of $1 billion for them to maintain that cold chain, and they have to pass on that cost. And that's why it's important that we resolve this question of load shedding. So there are three lanes to the resolution of the problem. So the first one is on the generation side, the improvement of the installed units at Eskom in keeping with the energy action plan that was unveiled by the president last year in July. We are seeing significant results. We know now that they were able to maintain levels of about 61% of the energy availability factor. By that I mean, first, the reliability of the units, and secondly, the fact that the units are performing at greater levels of efficiency. Essentially, they are producing the amount of megawatts that they approximate their designed capacity. And as a result, of course, you are seeing lower levels of load shedding intensity. Of course, you'll argue that the demand has gone down, so the key number you look at is on the available capacity. So for the past 14 days or so, we are generating more than what we are consuming. So I think it's important. Of course, you asked the question, so why are we at stage 2 in the evening? So that is because in that available capacity you have put in your peaking generation units and emergency reserves. So we really tend to preserve those, and as a result of that preservation, then we are keeping it at stage 2. We have returned the 2 units at Kusile. The one was on planned maintenance. Unit 4 has come back, and then Unit 1. Unit 3, rather, of the 3 units that had gone out at Kusile, came back at the latter part of last month. I'm happy to say that we are ahead of our time in returning the next unit. So in the next 7 days or so, that unit will be coming back. So we'll be getting an additional 800 megawatts. We did indicate that by November we'll get another 800 megawatts from Kusile. And then by December, we'll get another 800 megawatts. So if you do a Dipalo arithmetic, that's not math, there is 800 times 3 is 2,400 megawatts in the next 3 months. So we are really turning the corner, but not yet out of the woods. So that's on the generation side. On the transmission side, there's a need for us to accelerate the strengthening and rollout of a transmission line to help us to accommodate new sources of generating capacity, especially our renewables in the Northern Cape, the Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape. And we need upwards of anything 210 billion to 500 billion, depending on who you speak to, but we know the floor is about 210 billion. We know that the Eskom balance sheet is compromised. The sovereign matrix, as Comrade Mamloko was saying, has been deteriorated. All the major matrices, I'm talking about the balance deficit, the cost of borrowing, as a result of that debt to GDP, as a result of the economy that is not growing, and your ambition to continue to provide the social wage. So you can't really go to the fiscal. So we need to design a creative, innovative solution to tap the liquidity that is sitting with the private sector, and of course there has been some initiative, so we're going to be concretizing that. So the NEC says accelerate that, but the asset must remain in the hands of the state. So we are not privatizing transmission, but we need to find creative ways of tapping into that liquidity. And then the last one, Comrade Mamloko, is on the distribution side. So distribution, there's an Eskom component. So here I'm talking about the last mile connection. There are communities that have not had electricity for up to 6 years. I've been to Orange Farm. So they are connected to the grid, but they don't have electricity, and it's because of the transformer is blown up, the substation the same, and this is largely as a result of what you call illegal connection, non-technical losses, and you find that the capacity of the transformer was not designed to carry the amount of load. So we need to replace that. Eskom needs to invest in Eskom supplied areas on the infrastructure that is required to carry the new load. But then the bigger problem is in areas that are provided for by municipalities. You know that their revenue base has been eroded, they are illiquid, they are insolvent, some of them. They don't have the necessary income to be able to replenish or maintain this infrastructure. So what the NECs will be discussing is perhaps putting together a financing instrument to make it possible for these municipalities to avail the infrastructure as we resolve the issues of the debt that they have to Eskom. So the point I'm making is that we the NEC, seized with these questions to address the issues of load shedding, as Comrade Chair has indicated. Mamoloko is a structural constraint. There is no way that the South African economy will grow for as long as we have load shedding. And of course, the Minister of Finance can do, however, how much he likes, tinkering at the margin. If you have not resolved the fundamental and underlying problem of load shedding, of the inefficiencies on the logistics side, the South African economy will not be able to realize its potential. So the NEC is having that a comprehensive look. First, we give an update, and of course they'll provide their advice, counsel on what are some of these interventions. And of course, on the back of these interventions, you need to industrialize through localization, create the necessary jobs, the kind of skills that are required to support a green agenda and a decarbonization effort on part of the state. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sputla. Thank you very much, Comrade Chair, the ETC. I think colleagues are itching. There's one itching this side from power. I'll start with power. And then, so we'll start on the left side, power and SABC. And I don't see any other hand to the side, and then I'll move to the right. Please go ahead.
Gosnati Shazi from Power FM News. Just two questions. My first question, just with regards to the end date of load shedding. So after the 55th National Conference, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Electricity Minister has on number of occasions said that load shedding will come to an end in December, latest January next year. Of course, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, revised South Africa's growth outlook to almost zero growth due to load shedding. So my first question is, are we still on track to meet the load shedding targets of December? And then secondly, my second question, I want to play devil's advocate. And the reason why I'm saying devil's advocate, because you guys are really trying in ending the energy crisis. But my last question is the ANC using load shedding as a political gambit? So we're almost 30 weeks into the elections. Is the organization using ending load shedding as part of its election strategy? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadi.
I think Shazi has covered me with the first question, and because Mr. Ramaphosa, it's not the first time we've asked you this, and you said that, you know, ANC President
Dr. Ramaphosa
is your boss. So if he says,
Yep.
if he says that load shedding will be a thing of the past in 2024, will the ANC actually meet that target? The last time we spoke to Mrs. Naiteng, she had mentioned that the ETC would establish a committee that would be preoccupied with assessing Treasury's cost-cutting measures. How's the work of that committee actually going? Have you also engaged with the SABC, which was actually unhappy, about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the chair covered that extensively, but I'm sure she can reiterate. All right. Then I'd like to move to the right. Do we have Yasindebu? And then Sunday Welfare. Welcome, Sunday World.
Okay, my name is Ntebo, and I'm with the SABC. Yes, in fact, I've listened to the statement by the chairperson of the HC and Mr. Ramaphosa. It's worth listening and interesting to listen to. But it's just interesting for these guys who are here, and maybe for those who are better off in society in terms of understanding. But for ordinary South African, I'm sorry that I call people ordinary South Africans. But for ordinary South Africans, what concerns them is the high cost of food. Is there any sort of direct intervention in terms of really empowering or making sure that they are better off? And I'm saying this against the backdrop of the high petrol cost, of fuel cost, the interest rates that are rocketing. There are many things that have gone up, but their lives haven't improved. So is there any sort of direct intervention as opposed to saying we wait for electricity, we wait for the ending of load shedding and also any direct intervention, the agency, as the government. And Minister Kubai, the chair of the ETC, in fact, Dr. Ramakopa spoke about some people having 6 years without electricity because of a blown out transformer. This is as a result of the mushrooming of informal settlements. Are we using the mushrooming of informal settlements just to make sure that people have got a place to stay and ultimately being happy that they were given land, build their own shacks on cuckoos, and ultimately maybe say, yeah, well, we've got an informal settlement called the Dubai Informal Settlement. Mamuluko Dubai Informal Settlement. We'll vote for Mamuluko Dubai when he happens to be the president or the deputy president. Without looking at the impact that that has ultimately, especially on electricity.
Thanks very much, Ntibu. Sunday, what?
Thank you very much, Masheng. My name is Mawani. I work for the Sunday World. Chairperson of the ETC, I've got 2 questions for you. First, on fiscal management, is this NEC discussing any plans to freeze tenders as of November until the improvement of the economy as part of managing the fiscal crisis that the country finds itself in? 2, you speak about a lot of green shoots. I had to Google this way. You told me English. So I realized that green shoots in simple terms means growth and renewal and improvement. But the reality contrasts to the contrary. You say there's green shoots, but everything is going south, unemployment. Just wondering, where are these green shoots coming from? Because I think I actually noted, you mentioned that term about 5 times on several issues. I do not, okay, yeah, let me leave it at that. And then Minister Sputa, or ANC member Sputa, this is ANC. As it relates to coal, I didn't hear anything, and I mean, we know that this has been a divisive issue for the longest time, the decommissioning of the coal-fired power stations and stuff like that, and whether we're being bullied by the first world countries. As it relates to coal, what conversation are we having right now, since coal is our main base load, as it were? And then secondly, are you also having conversation about the shenanigans in the coal supply? No, sorry, in the diesel supply. As it relates to petrol SA, I recently came across that there's a huge syndicate that is going on there in terms of the diesel that you use to shield citizens, as it were, from aggressive load shedding. There's a whole lot of cabals that are operating within petrol SA. Are you having those conversations? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take that as a first set of hands. May take it back to you, Chair. Or Congressman, can we start?
Yes, maybe just to make the following point. So what are we resolving? I made an effort at the onset of my contribution in support to what the Comrade Kensani has raised in framing the question. What is the principal political question that we are resolving? We are resolving an economic problem. And I've attempted to map the kind of injury and harm it's causing to the South African economy and the fact that it's inflicting a disproportionate amount of injury on the poor. So that's what we are resolving. And I make the point that load shedding and the inefficiencies on the logistics side are the ones that are undermining our ability to address this question. So that's what we are resolving. And the fact that if this continues unabated, is going to undermine our strategic objective, that of transformation, universal access, essentially what in the ANC we call the realization of a national democratic society. So I'm making that point. It's important to know that we are not, our first question is not our electoral prospects next year, but is to resolve these questions, the underlying economic problem. But also it goes without saying that you want to eliminate load shedding as an election ticket. So it's important that you make every attempt that as you resolve the fundamental question, you erase it out of the vocabulary of the electorate when they go into the elections. So we'll do everything possible within the parameters of the law to address that because of the kind of harm that is causing. And of course, the president of the ANC makes a point, the last NEC made the point that make sure that you introduce measures to accelerate the resolution of this problem before the end of the year. And that's why I take time to explain to you what are these units that are going to give us the additional megawatts. And I'm quite confident that we are going to see significant amount of reduced intensity of load shedding. And in fact, you are going to have, it's going to be very common going into December that you are going to have days without load shedding. And I'm confident that the amount of generating capacity will exceed the amount of demand when we are during the summer period. But you have not resolved load shedding. That's the point I'm making, is that our best measure of resolving whether we have resolved load shedding is when the amount of available capacity is able to meet the worst case scenario during winter. And that's when we reach levels of about 34,000 megawatts. So if you had to look at our performance over the last 3-4 weeks, we are hovering anything 28,000 megawatts. Now we're improving, we're getting into the 29,000 megawatts consistently. The amount of units that are out when we did the winter scenario, we thought that we were going to lose up to 18,000 megawatts. Today, as I speak to you now, we're averaging about 13,500. And in fact, today, yesterday, we are below, about 13,100. And then when these units come back, like I said, they give you another 2,400 megawatts. So we are going to be around 11,000 megawatts that are out. So it means that on the available generating capacity, you'll be sitting at about 31,000, 32,000 megawatts, when in fact the demand during winter, PM peak, summer, is going to be about 28,000 megawatts. So you are fine. Huh? So you'll not see that. But if it was winter today, and you have 33,000 megawatts of demand, and you are generating 32,000 megawatts, you have 2,000 megawatts short. And that's why the NEC instructing myself, Comrade Mantashe and his other capacity to say, get this additional 3,000 megawatts. And you know that we have said that some of the opportunity lies on the import, so the energy that is excess energy that is available in the SADC power pool, we need to buy that. We think we can get an additional 1,000 megawatts. We go into gas, we know that in the short term we can do about 3,000 megawatts, then we are fine. And then you have ended load shedding. So going into the summer, really, we are fine. I really want to say that. So when your lights are on, going into the festive season, we are all happy. You will not see the kind of load shedding we are seeing. But we should not be complacent. You have not resolved the problem until you have that additional generating capacity. I'm not sure which study of the IMF you have done, you have read, but the latest one, they've revised it upwards. Yes, as a result, they say the lessening of the load shedding has resulted.
There's another version.
Yeah, maybe there's another version. But they've revised. But the fundamental point we are making is that that's even revising it upwards it's still below 1%, so it's negligible. That's the point we are making, and I take that point really. Whether it's 0.8 or 0.9, the fundamental point we are making, that is negligible, that's not sufficient, and I accept that. And that's why we need to resolve the issues with regards to load shedding. The Comrade Mamoloko has indicated the kind of work that we are doing in government, of course, led by the ETC and the ANC on the issues around the inefficiencies in the port. Just to Ntego's point, so in the quest of just having a conversation around the cost of living, don't forget that we are providing the most generous social wage, and those things are not removed. What is that generous social wage? It means it's not just the grant for those who've got children, old age. No, it expands beyond that. So as I speak to you, we still provide a particular threshold of free basic services in relation to electricity and water. That's not removed. So if you go to all municipalities, many municipalities in the country, and all municipalities that are led by the ANC, the poor, essentially those who've got properties less than a certain threshold, they are exempted from rates and taxes. So I'm saying that in the course of doing that, those efforts must not be lost on us. There's that effort. So we're not removing those things. The social wage remain. I think the next question to be asked is that in the light of this additional punishment, especially directed at the poor, what is it that we're doing? Then it's a separate conversation. So that is in addition to the basket of measures that we were putting. And then to Mawande's question, no, the last NEC, no, the NEC before the last one resolved on this question, on the issues around the delayed decommissioning of our power station. So the NEC resolved that. One, as a result of the energy deficit, and of course the need for us to grow the South African economy, it is not rational for government to consider closing these power stations, and therefore you must delay the decommissioning, but simultaneously make sure that you are able to add new sources of generation capacity, especially your renewables, so that we don't convey the message that we are fixated on dirty forms of energy. We have an appreciation of not just our international obligation, but our obligation to posterity to ensure that we are greening the forms of generation. So 3 NECs ago, we took that decision before we entered into the winter period. Already that decision is there, and that's why you're saying that that decommissioning is delayed. And then on the issues of the diesel, the first point to be made is that in the totality of the mix of generation units, you also have these ones that are meant to come in to help us to relieve the intensity of load shedding when the generation is far exceeded by demand, and that's what we call the peaking plants, and they typically use diesel. So what's the point I'm making? The fundamental point I'm making is that it's part of that mix, but we only deploy it during periods where there's an energy deficit. But we know that because of the legacy issues, the challenges that is facing us, we've been having these machines on load. So as opposed to bringing them on board as and when there's a deficit in generation and demand, because demand has been consistently exceeding generation, so we've been running these machines, and as a result, essentially burning diesel to protect the South African economy. And what that is exposed is that there are inherent challenges in relation to the logistics or the movement of diesel as it relates to Petro SA. There was a period, I think, just as we transition into September, where we had a situation where we just didn't have this supply. So there was not a money problem. I did indicate that there's 30 billion rand war chest that has been set aside to support Eskom's ability to purchase diesel on the open market so that we are able to run these units. But it was principally because where we contracted with Petro SA, we had those challenges. And of course, I mean, I have no appreciation or any evidence that there are cartels that are undermining that work. If to the extent that there is, I'm sure that the team that is supporting me or from the SSA and that will be able to resolve that. But we have said with Petro SA to say, I think it's unacceptable that we are purchasing, the money is there, and then the diesel is just not available. And really the explanation that was given to us was short of being acceptable. And that's why those conversations are ongoing to ensure that you are able to address that problem and it doesn't recur going into the future.
Come closer.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. Let me start with, I think you did speak to the issue of revised growth, and perhaps just to emphasize the issue that I don't think at some point we lead to only about elections as the ANC. Our mandate as pursuing the NDR is about changing the lives of the people for the better. And alleviating poverty, unemployment, and inequality is one of those. It's a key component, and load shedding adds to the burden in terms of society, and therefore we have to resolve it. I don't think that is something that we converse around it just on issues of electioneering, but as something that we committed to. And by the way, as a mandate from conference, because it's a resolution of conference when we came out of the conference. Then the issue, Mashadi, you raised about cost-cutting measures and the engagement. The alliance meeting is between ANC, we had COSATU, we had SACP. So all of us were in that. We've had several engagements, not just one meeting, both in terms of all the alliance partners, because what we were doing was the mandate from all alliance partners in terms of what can be done and what can be done. And conversations on where are the areas which, as a movement, are priorities for us. As I reflected on them, the issues of dealing with ensuring that we understand that already households are burdened, but the primary mandate is to grow the economy. So that's why issues of infrastructure. Then there was a discussion around credibility of the state in fulfilling its commitments. So the issue of, I spoke about the issue of implementation of the wage agreement. So that would have been what COSATU would have raised in the public. And I don't think we're differing as ANC from that point. And other things, we agreed that because they form part of a broader economic growth strategy, but also on policies, for example, what would have been raised by SACP, that's when we agreed that the Alliance Economic Summit is critical and therefore will be the platform for us to engage and resolve all those broader issues led by the national officials and like at a committee level. So that's what we had done. Ndebo asks about it's better for us. No, it's not, Ndebo. I can tell you that when the cost of living goes high, it affects even upper class and middle class. So it's not about just ordinary South Africans or those that we coin at the lower end. It's everybody else. And that's why the impact and what we are doing as work we are monitoring, we are looking, for example, even in terms of the food basket. I can tell you now, if you trace, we are able to look even what are the largest prices. For example, we're able to see the 5 largest: onion, potatoes, butternut, orange, and carrots. They've increased. I mean, onions increased by 84%, because that's the conversation you use to drive your conversations or mandate to your deployees in the agricultural space. So you'll be able to say to Comrade Togo, this is what is worrying us. Go and pay attention. For example, we would have previously identified the issues of cooking oil as a concern, because at that time it was the highest in terms of the prices. If you look now, it has decreased by 29%. So there is work that is being done, and we are monitoring the interventions and the impact thereof. The conversation about interest rates, as much as we respect the independence of the South African Reserve Bank, but we do make observations about what we are seeing as concerns and what is it, and that's why the Reserve Bank governor as well would make comments to say, grow the economy would not be under pressure. But we do understand as well, other things are beyond global factors to affect us. So the prices in terms of commodities or the fuel prices, that conversation we are having, that's why even you can see the work that is done in REF, because we are raising concerns about the amount and the components that you are seeing in what goes as levies on the fuel prices. So those continue. So we might not today have the answers of everything, but we already consistently pay attention into those areas and see what we are doing. Comrade Sputla speaks about the interventions. I mean, that's why one of the things we would have done if there were not these implications in terms of high cost of living, perhaps the issue of SRD, because it was an intervention towards COVID-19, but recognition that you're going to leave families without food because of where the environment is not sufficient, but it's something that helps, and that's why government has kept it, and it's a decision of the NEC. So it's those interventions that we're making in the lives of people that we continue to monitor. Others, it's work in progress. Others, it's what we have to deal with as a long term, and also consistently report to the NEC of that tracking. The issue of transformers and work actually is not really driven by informal settlements. It's driven by backyard dwelling. So there's two. When we look, for example, if you go to old townships, your Guguletu, your Soweto, there's a point where we worked quite extensively in Soweto even during load shedding, where would want to understand why transformers they would be replaced today, and then within 24 hours or 48 hours it blows. Not because they are not put, but because of the houses calculated. So when you put bulk infrastructure in a community, previously what we used to do in terms of engineering specs, and that's the conversation we're having from human settlements and all the related in terms of planning, is that you'd have a margin that is minimum, whether you talk about bulk water, your sanitation, and that's why you'd have sewers running because they are overpopulated. They can't cope with the capacity that you have in townships. And that's why some of the people I would have said to them, when they ask me whether I support the expansion of backyard dwelling as an economic tool, I said, it's good if it's done with upgrading of infrastructure. So we've got to do upgrading of infrastructure if we are to accommodate the backyard dwelling. And that's why movement of people out of those townships to find alternative land and resettle them, it's quite critical. Hence, if you look at quite a number of them, whether you talk about your Cape Town, would have identified and to get to a project for moving of people in Guguletus and Kailicha to be able to go there. Mass project, but then it's not coping. Lufereng, that's why it needs to grow in Soweto to be able to cater for the people who are in the backyard. So not us creating informal settlements as government, by the way. If you go and look, 90% or almost 100% of informal settlements are created by citizens themselves. And majority of them actually stay in where it's not even suitable for human settlements. And that's why it puts the pressure, when you look at urbanization issues, puts the pressure in terms of relocation, finding suitable land majority of the time in these urban areas and your metros and intermediary cities. You find that you do not have land. That's why alternative working of ensuring that you can put them either in buildings in inner city refurbishment is a difference. So we do not utilize that as an area of growth in terms of informal settlement. Where we have them sitting upgrading of informal settlement, we always talk about all those services. So we provide services in phases, and then it deals with those different. So I don't think any of us in South Africa or even in government supports just the sitting of informal settlement. I've been vocally, even as early as last week in NCOP, where I condemned the illegal occupation of land because it denies us an opportunity to be able to plan better and place people in conducive environment. So it's not our support for informal settlements, but where they are, we tend to want to support them and provide services and upgrade because they are already there. Some of them, because of Fire Act, you can't relocate without providing an alternative accommodation and based on the issues of courts, previous court judgments. Now, there are no plans, Mawande, in terms of freezing of any tenders or procurement. There isn't at all. The issue here, what the conversations is about, obviously we have a commitment in terms of our annual performance plans in government overall. which are still its commitment to Parliament and to the public. So still has to be managed and has to be developed, have to be overseen. But what is the problem is that you do find, that's why we said, go and look in areas where there are underperformance or underspending. Utilize those as clawback and save and take the money into other redirected positions. And that's the work that we've said needs to be done. 2 is to prioritize the areas that will help us to grow as well. Safeguard the country, safeguard the citizens, but also make sure that you are able to have a growth, a long-term growth. Because we do say that we can't continue to have short-term approach on these matters. Growth of the economy is the ultimate solution, because otherwise we'll consistently talk about having to manage the fiscal. When there's no revenue, and we looked at what are the causes, why do we find ourselves in trouble now? We went and saw, okay, impact as well, load shedding, let's end load shedding because of productivity, revenue generation in terms of corporate that would have seen a lot of money coming through, income tax, a lot of high percentage of our revenue comes from income tax. And therefore, when people are not working, it means we do not have revenue. So those things, and what are the causes? It's that similar. The mining sector would have spoken up, would have come out quite harsh in terms of the logistics. And also, so we were seeing job threats. And that's why the interventions in the logistics are quite critical for us to resolve so that we can get the economy back. So those are some of the things that we are dealing with to be able to respond to the challenges that we have, not only around shortism. I think the intervention now from an ANC point of view is to say, please, can you not just pay attention to now, but we want to see the long-term vision, the long-term plans, and pay attention in monitoring and report to us consistently. The Alliance similarly to say, we want those report consistently so that they can come. Maybe let me come to the issue of decommissioning of coal and just to support Comrade Sputla. Last week I was at a Berlin conversation, and one of the issues there, and we're not doing what others are not doing, where you find in that when a country has some difficulties, pragmatism comes. I'm stealing from the Chancellor there, because the German Chancellor in our conversation about what we are seeing from Germany and UK they are doing in terms of renewables program or clean energy, having to revise at that particular time. And they were saying, you've got to look, each country has to look at what are the interventions you do at that time to safeguard your economy, to also safeguard the interest of your citizens, while you are working on a long-term plan. So it's not only South Africa that says, we now have this challenge, like Comrade Sputla was saying, of us ensuring that we end load shedding, secure our economy, secure growth, and also protect our citizens. Therefore, we'll delay the decommissioning of our plans, but not cancel. And that's the key word. We delay, we're not cancelling that program. So we delay it to have this intervention now, while we continue, because the issue of the renewable plants and other interventions, as we said, ours is an energy mix, continues. So you'd have seen from DMRE issuing the process of the IRP. They would have issued power purchase agreements in other areas. They would issued other bid windows. So that work continues. So it's a parallel work where we're growing, because I do believe that also is an opportunity. What we need to do is to push on the manufacturing side. You ask, what are the green shoots? Look at Stats SA in the past 3 quarters. You'll see that, for example, actually we believe that if we do not have load shedding, our economy would be sitting somewhere above 2.5% in terms of that. So that's green shoot, because it shows that the interventions that we're doing are working. And that's why there is a revision, acknowledgement by World Bank and IMF to say there are interventions that are starting to show. They've revised it to the level where estimations were made by Treasury. So it means that our modeling in the country and the interventions that we are doing, we are starting to see those are the green shoot. You go to the unemployment rate, we've decreased it to 1% year on year. But when you look at the temporary jobs, temporary jobs have increased with 13%. So we're paying attention. It's the issue of people having to be able to put food on the table. Yes, temporary jobs are not what we want, but they are intervention because it's better than people being out. When you look at that statistics, it will show you that we are reducing the people who have lost faith in looking for a job. Those are the green shoots that we're talking about. So both in terms of stats for economic growth and unemployment, but also we look at the figures in terms of manufacturing, and we are zooming into it to see whether can it be sustainable, can it be other things. The work that is being done by Comrade Sputla in terms of solar panels, it's what we have seen, the manufacturing coming. So it's those opportunities that are coming into the work that created by some of the interventions that we've got to be able to consistently pay attention to them, analyze them, and say, how do we then ensure that there's sustainability going forward? And hence we can speak confidently that we expect from next year and going forward that we will see the economy actually passing 2% and going above in the outer years as we anticipate because of the interventions that we're deliberately making as the ANC government.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair, the ETC subcommittee, Comrade Hosienzo, for the very comprehensive responses to the questions asked. I'd like to wrap it up at this point. Do I have your permission, colleagues? And I'd like to apologize for that aircon situation. I think we should have kept it on like earlier. I saw a few of my media colleagues sort of intending to slumber. That's why I think we should wrap it up so that we can get home safely. But thank you very much. This then brings us to the end of our today's last PESA. Let's see each other in the morning according to the updated advisory that we will issue shortly from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. They wanted to, is it there?
So